Hey there, this is Tim Sheridan from Boys of Spring. You probably heard there's a little anniversary going on. Yeah, 100 years of Wrigley Field. I got the chance to talk to Cubs fan and award-winning journalist George Will. He's an author of the new book, A Nice Little Place on the North Side. Here's some of that interview.
I think I wrote A Nice Little Place on the North Side to get it out of my system. So, I've been a Cub fan since about 1948 when I was 7 years old. And there have been ups and downs, and frankly, far more downs than ups. But through it all was this sense of a magical place on the north side of Chicago. A lot of people don't realize that Wrigley Field was, we think, the first ballpark in which when the ball went in the stands on a foul ball, you got to keep the ball. Baseball was such a small business back then, and the owners were frankly rather cheap, that they would play an entire game with 1 or 2 baseballs. Now think about that, you're a pitcher. You're in the 8th inning. The ball's been pounded around for 8 innings. It's scuffed. You can imagine what the pitcher could do with that thing. It's a wonder anyone got any hits after the 5th inning or so. And Wrigley said, you know, half the population is female. And we want the ballpark experience to be nice and genteel enough that ladies can enjoy it. But before they can enjoy it, they have to feel welcome. And you have to develop the habit. I've often said that football is a spectacle. Baseball is a habit. It's a habit, a daily habit on the radio or television, the habit of going to the ballpark. And in order to get women to do this, they had Ladies' Day. And it was free. Get the ladies to come out. And they would come out dressed as though they were going downtown to Carson Peary Scott's or Marshall Field in Chicago to shop. And they got such large crowds, they would have an overflow and they'd stand in the outfield. And they'd put a rope up and the ladies would stand behind the ropes, their heels, and they wore heels to the ballpark, sinking into the Wrigley Field outfield. And they were a little bit partisan, evidently. When the Cubs were up and they'd hit a deep fly, they'd come in a little bit so that it would go into the crowd and be a home run, I guess. And when the bad guys were up, the visiting team, they'd pull back to give the Cub outfielders more room to catch the ball. One of the things that surprised me was to learn that Jack Ruby, the man who shot Oswald, who had just shot Jack Kennedy, that Ruby, before he moved to Dallas, had grown up in Chicago and had been a vendor at Wrigley Field and had been a vendor of such dubious habits as a salesman that Bill Veck, the young man who helped put the ivy on the walls at Wrigley Field, said they would watch this guy Ruby with a telescope to see what he was doing to customers and make sure he was behaving. I mean, Wrigley Field is older than the Supreme Court building. Wrigley Field itself has this enormous history. You know, when you think about it, Civil War veterans, no doubt, came to games in Wrigley Field. And so we're connected somehow all the way back to the Civil War, this great venue. Baseball fans are tribal. Cub fans are a little bit more so, partly because the venue hasn't changed. And they have this kinship with about 100 million people who've passed through those turnstiles and walked on that concrete and sat in those seats and tried to decipher that scoreboard from a distance. So I think simply the knowledge that the ballpark connects them with so much history. We're a young country still, but Wrigley Field's been around about half the life of the Republic. Well, I was actually at the Bartman game. I was sitting with Andy MacPhail, who was then president of the Cubs. When the ball went into, and Bartman interfered, and Moises Alou, the left fielder, had his little tantrum. Andy MacPhail, good baseball man, very calm, looked up at the television monitor, said, "Good call," that is not fan interference, "good call," sat back down. Those of us sitting up there couldn't quite hear what was going on with the fans. It got kind of ugly. We didn't hear that. The game went on, and of course went very badly for the Cubs, but we didn't hear the anger in the fans that we later realized had been rampant. Wrigley Field itself is a venue. It attracts people. It's a destination. People come to Chicago to go to Wrigley Field. It's one of the top tourist attractions in the state of Illinois. Every baseball fan, he can live in Seattle. He's not really done it as a baseball fan until he's been to a game at Wrigley Field. You go to a ballpark, you hope to win, you'd like to win, but if you lose, we're going to do it again tomorrow. And therefore, you're not there just to enjoy the final score. You're there to enjoy the ballpark. And the Cubs, for all their problems, still have the best ballpark ever.